Today, we'll be covering a brief overview of the MSc that was recently launched, and we'll go in depth on the whole certification process, from the application to the funding to the audit. And we will hear from Sukumar Verma, Kenny Lowe, and myself. We will have Q&A as the last segment. So if you have prepared questions from the pre-reading material that are not addressed during the briefing, please type them into the window and we'll address them during the Q&A. This webinar is being recorded, so the material on here will be available shortly afterwards. Now, a note of congratulations. Congratulations on taking the initiative toward being certified. Our goal is to enable all of you serving the 8 MICE sectors to understand that you may actually begin to prepare to apply for certification now, and how to determine which tier to apply for according to your readiness. And with that, we'll start with Sukumar Verma on the opening address. Sukumar Verma is the VP of Industry and Enterprise at SACEOS. He's also the chair of the Singapore MSc Committee and the Managing Director of Informa Markets. I'll hand over to you now, Sukumar.
Thank you, Sharon, and good afternoon, everyone. Great to see such a high level of interest in the Singapore MSc, and it's fantastic to have you all on board for this webinar. If you have attended the briefing on 24th of January, then please bear with me because then you've seen my slides. But hopefully these will serve as an important reminder and reinforce some of the key messages that I made. There are 2 parts to this briefing. The first part is the why and the what. Why do we need to do this? Why do we need to move forward on sustainability? Why do we specifically need to adopt the Singapore MICE Sustainability Certification? And then what is it? How does it work? What's the methodology? And I'll cover all of that very briefly in about 15 minutes. And the second part is where Sharon and Kenny will get into the business end of things and talk to you in more detail and deep dive into the process of actually obtaining the grant and the certification. So just to comment very briefly on what's happened so far. The certification was launched 24th of January. We got a lot of interest from trade media, from the industry at large, and there were a whole range of questions surrounding the SACEOS and SDB objectives behind putting this out. And I think our message has been very consistent, and it's fair to say that we have really moved on in our discussions on sustainability and climate change, simply because we all know it's happening. There is enough and more discussion on the fact that climate change is a challenge. I think we are all aware of the Singapore Green Plan 2030, the 2030 and 2050 national targets, how the government and various industries are responding to climate change. So this part of the discussion is now behind us. And now it's about how various industries are responding to it. And as a trade association, as SACEOS, it's about how we can enable industry to act on it. And this is where the Singapore MICE Sustainability Certification comes in. So the objective of this is to give you a starting point, is to give you a framework, is to tell you what to do as a first step, as simple as that. Because this is in line with the various discussions we've had with our members, that sometimes people don't know where to start and how to begin. And I think herein lies the answer. So what do you get with the MSc framework? There are 2 parts to it. There is, of course, the guide to the MSc that tells you the process, that tells you how to go about it, and we'll talk in more detail about it. And then there is the actual framework itself, the criteria document that lists out the various clauses that you need to comply with across the various tiers of sustainability of the MSC. Most of you who have expressed interest would have probably seen these documents, and we hope you have lots of questions because that's the purpose of this briefing. For those of you who haven't seen this, by all means, please register your interest with the SACEOS Secretariat and you'll be given a copy. And come back to us with questions if you have. I will also pause for questions after about 15 minutes. As soon as I'm done, I will have to exit this briefing at about 3:30. But having said that, I think it's prudent to hold technical questions relating to the process and the criteria to the end, because all of that is yet to be covered. I'll give you a brief overview. So if you have any questions on the conceptual nature, on the strategy behind it, on the purpose behind it, by all means. But specific questions on the process, do hold them for later. So how did we go about doing it? It's taken us 5 months, maybe over 5 months. And our main stakeholders, Tubsud is the appointed technical writer and consultant for the criteria document and the process. So of course, SACEOS and STB. And collectively, we have worked with over 30 MICE industry companies who have contributed to focus groups and public consultation process and the MSC committee. So if you're here part of this call, thank you very much for your time and for your effort. What I'm trying to say is that we have incorporated a lot of views from industry to make this practical and to make this as pragmatic as possible. We have also referred to a range of existing global standards so that we make sure we are aligned with what's happening in the international world. And when we are dealing with international clients, there is an alignment as far as their expectations are concerned as well on what a sustainability initiative should look like. Having said that, I mean, as robust as we think this document is, it's important for the feedback process to continue. So when you're engaging with the Secretariat, when you're engaging with Tubsud as your certification body, and if you have comments, if you have feedback on particular clauses, please share that. And we will do our best to tweak it, to adjust it as far as possible, because ultimately this is by the industry for the industry. It has to work, and it's a really important point. If you come across a clause or a set of clauses that you think need some adjustment, do voice that. I'm not saying we'll say yes to everything because there is some method behind what's already there, but it's important to engage. On the subject of clauses, now they're clustered into 3 key sustainability pillars, and I think we've said this many times, and we say it yet again. It's important to understand the definition of sustainability. It's not just about the environment. It's not just about waste and carbon and energy and water. As critical as these things are, the definition of sustainability is a little bit more strategic. It includes the social component, how we engage with our communities, how we incorporate diversity and inclusion, how we develop our human resource competency. It includes governance aspects of how within a company the management approaches it, of how we have sustainable procurement policies. So it is a bit overarching, and I think it's relevant to quote a particular example here. And we came across this during our pilot certification process, and you probably will as well. And there is a particular clause which urges companies to look at the credentials, specifically anti-bribery and corruption policies, specifically managing child labor policies, having the right labor laws in place, And the clause urges companies to look at that when working with supply chain partners. And the feedback we got was that this is next to impossible, and it's very challenging. And how can we expect to deal with our supply chain partners to this level? It's a fair question, but I think it is also worth remembering that if you are doing a corporate event for a BMW or an Audi, and you're doing a product launch for them, and the requirement is to source T-shirts and lanyards for 200 people or 500 people, and you want to source them from a supplier outside of Singapore. The reality is we live in a world today where you have to look at that supplier closely and get some semblance of understanding on how they run their business, because you don't want to be caught out with your client. If you're dealing with a supplier who does not have some of these critical policies in place, that's the fact of it. So this is not a clause that is relevant only to larger corporates. It could be relevant to a small procurement item like T-shirts and lanyards, for example. Now you could still end up disregarding that because there is an 80% rule, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But I wanted to share this as an example that there is a definition to sustainability. It's more than just environment. And when you're looking at your wider ecosystem, it's about the people, it's about the local communities, it's about your supply chain network. And really, all of this has to be considered. And you will come across clauses in all of these areas. So the MSC is progressively tiered across three levels, obviously bronze being the lowest, followed by silver and gold. And as you can see, the compliance requirements gets more difficult, for lack of a better word, as you go to a higher category. And it's been structured in a manner for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we understand that as companies, we are in different stages of our sustainability journey. Some companies are really just starting out, but they want to get certified. Sure, go for bronze. Some companies are further ahead, go for a higher category. Also, this is meant to inspire you for progression, for improvement. So if you've got bronze this year, aim for the next higher category in the recertification process. There's a couple of reasons behind the tiers. We do want a high level of uptake, and I think it's important for us as a wider ecosystem to make sure that the uptake is high, and that's why we think that these tiers will really help. It will help your budget as well. I mean, having said that, I think we will cover the pricing in a while. But even though the costs go up from bronze, silver, gold, I mean, the bronze is $370. So this is after subsidy. So it's literally low as it's there in the table. There are some mandatory clauses as well that stretch across all the three categories, and that's to do with having a policy, and that's to do with training your staff. We'll talk in more detail about that. It addresses also the 8 sectors in MICE, as you can see from the slide. Now, it doesn't mean that organizations beyond these sectors can't get certified. If you're a corporate that does events and you want to apply as an event organizer, sure, we will consider it. You can apply. But of course, the initial purpose, SACEOS as a trade association for MICE, this is our ecosystem, as you see on your slide, and that's why it's catered to this ecosystem. Okay, this is important. Now, we spoke about the tiers, bronze, silver, and gold. And for you to get any tier, you need to comply with 80% of the clauses. So it gives you an outer, so to say, again, recognizing that you are in different stages of your sustainability journey. So if there are, let's say, 50 clauses in bronze, you need to comply with 80% of those 50 clauses. So you can sort of, you can pick and choose what works for your company. But if you're doing silver, you've got to do 80% of bronze and 80% of silver. And correspondingly, if you're doing gold, you've got to do 80% of bronze, 80 of silver, and 80 of gold. So the level of difficulty, obviously, as is to be expected, goes up. That's the first point. I think the other really important point is self-assessment. In your organization, you are best placed. You know best where you stand. And when you get the framework, when you get the criteria document from SACEOS, and once your teams had read of it, you will get a very clear picture on where you stand. You must remember that it is about furnishing the documentation. It's about furnishing the evidence. You may think you're doing enough to apply for silver, but you have to be able to furnish that documentation. You have to be able to furnish that evidence that is required by to suit. So that needs to be a factor in your self-assessment, not just about where you are as a business. Two things to consider. And yeah, this is my last slide. So I think it's important to sort of finish off on the why. And even though I said initially that, yes, the debate sort of moved on knowing what climate change is to more action-oriented. But we are seeing some new trends, and we are seeing trends in relation to customer needs. It's very, very evident. I think in the last sort of few months, I have been to two government event tender briefings, Singapore Maritime Week and Singapore International Energy Week. Both of these tender briefings, you had a whole range of companies attend those briefings. And there was one slide very clearly asking for organizers and venues to come up with sustainability initiatives for the entire week. So the customers are wanting it, government agencies are wanting it. That's one of the whys. The other is, as I said, you have a reference point now. You know what to do. So if you don't have a corporate sustainability department, as most companies don't, most SMEs don't, well, guess what? SACEOS Secretariat is your corporate sustainability department. And this is your reference point. And this framework is now telling you what to do and how to take the first step in sustainability. And it allows you to manage risk and provide assurance to your clients. The last point I'll make, and this got a lot of traction in various discussions I've been at, is that you are as strong as your ecosystem that you're part of. So if as an event organizer, if you want to go ahead and do something, but if your venue and if your F&B caterer is not compliant, then you have a challenge. Therefore, it's really, really, I mean, it's a very simplistic example, but it reinforces the fact that we have to move forward as an ecosystem. Everyone has to get on board this journey and make sure that they are in compliance. So I'm going to give it a pause here. It's time to just shoot questions at me if you have. As I said, my role in this briefing was to just highlight once again the why and the what at a headline level. There will be a much more detailed talk between Shirin and Kenny, but I'll pause nevertheless and see if there are any pressing questions that I can help you with.
Thank you, Sukumar. I'd like to open this up briefly to see if there's any general questions for Sukumar before we move on to the next segment. I see Duncan has put his hand up. If you'd like to type your question into the Q&A box, please, Duncan.
I'm not able to see the question, Shirin,
No.
unless it's not yet come through.
Yeah, it's not yet come through. Duncan, there's a Q&A chat dialog box there. You'll be able to pop your question in. Maybe it will just do a test now here. Okay, maybe not. Okay.
I saw another hand go up, Shirin. I didn't catch the name of the person. But if you're able to hear me, just type your question in this Q&A box. We've just done a test. It is working.
Okay, I see Duncan's question here. Okay, he's mentioned here, with the recent B Corp scandal, assume it'd be much harder for a big events company to achieve gold.
Well, I think it really is company specific, and also it is specific to the nature of events you do. I mean, if I were to briefly wear my corporate hat and not my SACEOS hat, as a trade show organizer, yes, it's extremely difficult. And we are still in the process of our self-assessment to see where we stand. But it just depends. I mean, you could argue that it's, and I stand corrected, but you could argue that a 200-person conference is potentially easier to make more sustainable than a large-scale trade show that's spread across 5 halls of the expo. So I think the level of difficulty will range, not just based on the size of the company, but also on the nature of events you do.
Okay, thank you. If there's any other questions? If not, is there any final remark that Sukumar would like to make before we move on to our next segment?
No, I'm good, Sharon. Thanks. I will cede control and mute myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Sukumar. Okay, for this segment, I'll cover in depth on applying for the MSc, the timeline, and the grant certificate, the grant application. Many of you, or if not all of you here, will have either already submitted your interest or have received a prompt to complete your details to receive a copy of the MSc framework and the guide to certification for pre-reading. If you would like to have the documents and have not yet received a copy, the QR code will be on the screen at the end of this briefing. Now, onto the content that we're going to cover this afternoon. We'll touch on the framework, a brief summary of the difference again between the tiers, the mandatory clauses. We'll cover on SACEOS' CES accreditation course, reference guidelines, pricing, how to sign up for the MSc by going through the certification process flowchart, and also a step-by-step process on the grant application. Then after that, I'll be handing over to Kenny from TÜV-SÜD, who will go through the audit process, and we'll round up at the end with our Q&A session. So what exactly is inside the MSc framework? It's a set of clauses or a checklist, and we will refer this as to the criteria. And if you look here on the left-hand column under clauses, there will be a list of all the criteria that has to be met. And the documents that can be submitted are in the middle column here, and they are just an example of the types of documents. They are not an exhaustive list of documents that shall be submitted for audit. And on the last column here, the tier are the bronze, silver, and gold tiers according to the clauses that they correspond to. It's worth to mention that the certification is certifying companies at an organizational level. So it's the companies that are being certified for the events that they hold or they serve, rather than the certification at an event-specific level. So it's the organizational level certification. And the second document that Sukumar has referred to earlier was the Guide to Certification, and we'll be covering how to apply in this briefing today. So there are two sections on the clauses, the general and sector specific. On the left-hand column here, the general clauses, the general sections here apply to all the sectors. They are the management approach, water, community social, HR competency, and procurement. And they will be applicable to all the sectors. And the second section is the sector specific, where there is waste, energy, and carbon, and some repeat sections under water and procurement. But to note that under water, the stand builder, freight forwarder, transport operator, and event tech do not have water, as we established when we did our focus group consultations. Summarizing what Sukumar has mentioned earlier on the differences between the tiers. For the bronze tier, companies required to demonstrate commitment and implementation of sustainability targets based on their sustainability policy and setting of targets in the organization. The certification process will be a documentary review of evidence submitted. So that means it will be a documentary audit. For silver, companies required to demonstrate that they're able to implement and establish sustainability initiatives based on their company's internal sustainability initiatives and commitments. The MSc process here will be a documentary review, followed by interviewing of personnel and also a site visit. For gold, companies required to demonstrate a results-based approach on the company's external sustainability initiatives. And this involves measurement and reporting on energy, waste, and carbon, and a verification for the waste. The process will be the same with a documentary review, interviewing of the personnel, and also a site visit. Kenny will go into a little bit more detail on this when he covers the audit. For companies to apply for the MSc, as mentioned earlier, there are two mandatory clauses. So the first is to have a sustainability policy in place. Now, on our website, we also have a sustainability template to download if you require that. A company shall have at least one representative complete one or more sustainability courses that are relevant to the MICE industry within the past 2 years. And examples of these are found below from the relevant industry MICE bodies here. We also have a SACEOS CES certified event sustainability accreditation course for individuals. So if a company has not had any of its reps sent for training yet, this can be done concurrently by enrolling on a course such as the CES. And at the time of certification, at least one module should be completed to attain your certification. So examples of the course dates for CES in March and April are listed here. This is to show that there are 3 modules for the CES. They're happening, and the next ones are happening in March and April. They're not happening in order, and companies can take any module at any time during the year as long as they're available. There's an elective module as well for the representative going for training to select from, happening in March and April. There are regular runs throughout the year, and there are different modules happening every month except the month of December. The next core modules for 1 and 2 are taking place in May and June. There's also grant subsidies available for eligible individuals, and we have the Skills Future and Tippet grant. To find out more information, go to our website, and to actually register and enroll, it's also on our sustainability webpage under the CES section. And when you go into that, your inquiries and enrollment inquiries will be answered by our partner, and that's NTUC Learning Hub. So all the information will be sent out by them once you register your interest. SACEOS and the Singapore Standards Council, SAC, developed a set of guidelines last year, which you may have seen or may look familiar to some of you. They are our WA3 and our WA4 waste and carbon management guidelines. For the MSc, we will make references to both of these guidelines here. And the cost of the guidelines are not included in the price of the certification here. It's the same for the CES. If companies are taking the CES, the same guidelines here are the course material for the CES. So if you have not already got a copy of your guidelines, they are available on our website as well. This Singapore MSc pricing has been made available on our website too. And if we take reference from an SME applying, for example, here for the bronze level, at a member rate, they would be paying $1,100 before GST. If they opt to apply for grant funding, they'll be eligible for up to a 70% grant subsidy, and the final amount payable will be $330 with the grant reimbursement. And if I take reference for a non-SME, for example, who would like to apply for the gold tier, and they would like to apply for more than one sector, say, for example, 3 sectors, after they apply for the grant and they're eligible for up to 50% grant funding, the final amount that company applying for gold would be $1,400. How would they apply for more than one sector? For example, if they were a venue, they could be certified as a venue. They could also be certified under AV operations and FNB, for example. That would be up to 3 sectors. So the price is the same for silver or gold for 3 or 4 sectors. Now, the definition of an SME is number 1, at least 30% local Singaporean or PR resident shareholding. And number 2, a group annual sales turnover of not more than 100 mil or group employment size of not more than 200 employees. In terms of the certification process timeline, there are 5 steps. And step number 1 is your pre-qualification and application. If you're doing a direct application, you're not applying for a grant, this will take 1 to 2 weeks. If you're applying for a grant, an additional 6 to 12 weeks is required after you submit your interest. Step number 2 will take 1 week, at least a week for document submission. Step number 3 in your audit will take between 1 to 3 weeks, depending on the tier of certification. And step 4, if there are any clarifications that are required to be made, allow 1 week for that. And step number 5, when it comes to certification issuance and the audit report, allowed another extra week for that. So in total, a company could allow 4 to 5 weeks for a direct application. And if they're going for a grant application, total time is between 10 to 20 weeks in total from start to finish, depending on how long it takes to receive the letter of offer. So I'll go into the certification process step 1 in more detail. So number 1, pre-qualification and application. Once a company has submitted their interest from the webpage and received a copy of the framework and guide to certification, they will carry out a self-assessment. And that would be under both the general and the sector that of relevance to you. So here's a reminder of the 8 sectors here: event organizer, stand builder, venue and hotels, F&B catering, transport operators, freight forwarders, event tech, and audiovisual providers. When the company is ready, they can request a quotation to apply for the desired tier of certification. This is the process of this is a flowchart of the entire certification process, step by step. Now, this chart is found at the back of the Guide to Certification document. If I zoom in on that first step of the pre-qualification application, here are the steps shown in the flowchart I just mentioned. And after carrying out the self-assessment, the company can request for a quotation. If they're applying for a grant, it allows an extra 6 to 12 weeks and to check their eligibility and proceed to applying for the grant on the Business Grants Portal, so the BGP, and thereafter wait to receive the letter of offer. Now I'll go into step by step on the grant application process. What do you need to prepare? So checking for eligibility, a CorpPass account, and in terms of documents, your ACRA file, the quotation, a copy of the Singapore MSc brochure, which is downloadable from our website, and if relevant, a valid TXI completed within 6 months. This is a Tourism Transformation Index. It's a self-assessment tool for Singapore-based tourism organizations. You may head over to the STB website to check if you are eligible to apply for that. So step number 1 is to head over to the Business Grants Portal, the BGP. This is a government portal for application of all the Singapore national grants. If you have not already got one, register your CorpPass account using your CorpPass admin to assign an appropriate BGP role to create that account. Step 3, click to apply for grant, and then you'll be redirected to the SingPass page. From there, you log into the BGP via the SingPass of the authorized CorpPass admin. Step 6 is filling in the company profile. So companies who have already applied for BGP before will have their information automatically populated on the screen. There'll be a prompt to fill up their financials. And for companies who do not have audited accounts, you may input based on your management account figures. There'll be a section here to fill in some more details of the company profile accordingly. And then when that's completed, you go back to the Business Grants Portal page, to the My Grants section, and you click on Get New Grant. It will bring you to this page, and this is where the company will pick and select the tourism sector. After selecting on tourism, there's a drop down here with a subsector. If you are a hotel, you select hotel. If you're not a hotel, you will select MICE for all other subsector clusters. At the present moment, the grant available for the Singapore MSc grant is by STB under the BIF, the Business Improvement Grant. If there are other grants available in the future, the companies will still log in as onto the same Business Grants Portal and apply for grant. Step 9, select upgrade key business areas, such as adopt technology, improve business processes, or raise service standards. Step 10, select core capabilities. And step 11, it's preparing your documents to have on hand to upload. So the project proposal, which is a copy of the Singapore MSc brochure from our website, and also the quotation. Step 12 is about filling in the application. So there will be a section here to check your eligibility and complete your contact details. Then the next section will be to upload the Singapore MSc brochure and quotation onto this section here on the proposal. And next step is to fill in the estimated business impact according to your company. Next, there's a section for completing the costs. So you may park your cost under the professional services section here. And then that brings you to the declaration and review section where you review and submit your document, grant application. And once that has been submitted, on the bottom left-hand corner here, you will see an acknowledgement of your application that's been submitted. The next step would be to monitor your application on the My Grants page on the portal. If there are any clarifications, an email will be sent by the agency. And then step 14, you'll receive a notification of your results. So this will be between 30 to 60 working days. Log into your BGP portal to accept the letter of offer, and note that only the company's acceptor in CorpPass can accept the letter of offer. And lastly, step 15, once you have accepted your letter of offer, you will be notified on the claim itself. And when that is completed, there'll be a grant date, a claim date due for your claim. So you log into the BGP to submit the claim before the claim due date. And the monies will be credited to the company's bank account via gyro. So that ends the summary of the grant application. We have come to the end of step 1, which is the pre-qualification and application. So on the left-hand side here, without a grant, a company may endorse and the quotation and submit that for payment. Again, if you're applying for a grant, please wait to receive the letter of offer first before making any transactions or payments, so that you do not void the grant. After payment has been received by SACEOS, the next step is for us to arrange a pre-engagement call with you and our appointed certification body TÜV for the document submission. And this is where I will hand over to Kenny. So step 1 here, the summary is the pre-qualification application process, which I just covered. Steps 2, 3, 4, and 5 on the audit process will be covered by TÜV. Okay, I would like to introduce here with me to run you through the audit process, Kenny Low. He's our sustainability analyst at TÜV. Over to you, Kenny.
Okay, so thanks, Shirin, for everything. So it's great to be here. And before we start, maybe it's good for me to give a brief introduction. So basically, I'm Kenny. I'm a sustainability analyst from TÜV sustainability team, where we work on sustainability-related projects, ranging from advisory services for corporate sustainability strategy all the way to assurance services. So I hope everyone here have heard about TÜV before. So basically, we are a German testing, inspection, certification company, and we've been in the business for more than 150 years and have issued more than 670,000 certificates since then. We have global presence in over than 1,000 locations worldwide, and with over than 26,000 employees, where over half of them are basically technical experts. So this serves us to be a one-stop solution provider for you and your company, wherever you are. We provide end-to-end services as well, starting from planning all the way to your decommissioning for people, products, and organizations in the field of testing, inspection, advisory, and assurances, such as auditing, verification, and/or validation. Okay. So moving on, as Shirin mentioned, Shirin already discussed about the first portion, and now we'll jump through the second portion, which is on the document submission. Okay, and we'll share a little insight as well on how companies can prepare themselves for the certification at the end of the certification process. Okay, going into the document submission portion. So let's start with the document submission portion. So for companies that wish to apply for grants, the very first step is to get your grant approved first and to receive a letter of offer. Only then, companies that wish to apply for the certification can start the audit process, okay, upon receiving quotation from SACEOS and submitting their payments. Okay. For companies who do not wish to apply for grants, you may start the audit process straight away once the payment is made upon receiving quotation from SACEOS. So before the audit process started, companies should have the relevant documents set up in place first. So we got a lot of questions. What are the documents to be provided? So these are the documents to be provided, but then bear in mind that this is a non-exhaustive list of the evidences that you can provide to us. First of all, are invoices or any financial evidences, measurement reports, event documentations, corporate documents, and many more. Example of invoices are mainly used to show evidences on the carbon emissions that the company wishes to report. For example, coming from the electricity use or coming from the products that they bought over, etc. At the same time, for electricity measurements, reports are also accepted if, let's say, the company can measure and have an on-site metering on the consumption itself. Other than that, because the standard itself covers a lot of scope in sustainability, events, documentation such as pictures, videos about any sustainability initiatives within the company itself is also acceptable. Okay. So the audit process itself, you see on the left on the chart there, it will begin with a pre-call engagement to understand first the nature of your business, as well as the audit planning, as well to plan the audit basically, and then the evidence gathering activities as well. So after that, companies can then proceed to send all of the evidences to us, the certification body, to assess. The certification body will then assess the completeness and accuracy of the evidences. Therefore, a good representability of the evidences are very crucial. Okay, so moving on into the audit process. So once the certification body has received the evidences, we will then proceed with the documentation audit, where we will run through the submitted evidence first and assess through our robust strategic analysis towards the clauses stipulated in the MSC guideline and framework. Okay, we will always seek for completeness, accuracy, relevance, as well as consistency within the evidences provided for us to audit. So as Sukuma mentioned initially, there are 3 tiers: bronze, silver, and gold. For the silver and gold level, we will then proceed with on-site audit to visit the office and or events to see their operations and assess the given evidences, as well as to see as well whether they have done the proper implementation of the clauses within their operations. So what are the criteria for a company to pass the audit? So to pass the audit, organizations must comply to all of the mandatory clauses, as well as at least 80% of the chosen tiers and the tiers below. For example, if you see there for gold level requirements, it means that companies will need to comply 80%, at least 80% of silver, bronze, as well as gold tier certifications. Okay. Moving on. Once the audit process are done, certification body will then identify whether there are any misstatements or deviations on the evidence provided and or found during the on-site visit and documentation audit. Okay. So the organization are then given 1 to 2 weeks time to rectify this. And after all of the misstatements and or deviations are addressed and rectified, the certification body will then send the audit report to SACEOS for the certification issuance. The certificate will then be issued by SACEOS to the organization. Okay. So with that being said, how can organizations better prepare themselves for the MICE sustainability certification? So I would like to illustrate this into a 5 steps journey for companies who can take it. First of all is industry benchmarking. It's important for companies to always learn from their peers or maybe learn from focus groups, learn from workshop groups, and just attend events where you can learn what are the most common sustainability strategies that be set by companies. After that, with all of the knowledges and all the resources, company can then start to think what are their sustainability compass. Having a compass or having a direction to go is always good, because companies must set their policies first, set their objectives, targets, find out what are the material topics that the company wants to focus on in terms of embarking in the sustainability journey. Only then, companies can then focus on building their capacity within the organization, be it doing workshops, trainings, or even sending out daily resources or maybe monthly resources to better help and make the employees ready to help the company become greener. After that, implementation phase is always important, whereby the companies go down and see within the operations what are the initiatives that can be done to make their whole value chain or even make their operations green. And it's always important as well to have a robust system to always check and reassess whether are the companies on track? Are you on track on achieving all of your sustainability objectives and goals? And finally, get certified and showcase your sustainability journey through this MSC certification. Okay, with that, I'll end my part with a call to everyone. Let's take the first step and together build a greener MICE ecosystem, because at the end of the day, sustainability can only be achieved through the collective efforts of all parties, regardless big, medium, or small, and even individuals like us who chose to join this webinar today. We all play a role in creating this greener ecosystem. So yeah, I guess thank you, and I'll hand over the webinar back to Shireen.
Okay, thank you, Kenny.